Welcome to the Work Well, Live Well podcast. I'm your host, Leanne. Drawing on the foundations of wellbeing science, positive psychology and neuroscience, I share tools, tips and strategies for people to intelligently manage their wellbeing so they can flourish into working well and living well. In this episode, I'm talking to Professor Sarah Blunden about sleep. Sarah has a dual role as Head of Paediatric Sleep Research and Professor of Clinical Psychology at Central Queensland University. She is a clinical psychologist specialising in the treatment of children's sleep problems and related mental health issues. Sarah is the founder of the Paediatric Sleep and Psychology Clinic and Director of Sensible Sleep. Sarah is a member of the Education Committee, Behavioural Sleep Medicine Subcommittee and Chair of the Indigenous Sleep Health Special Interest Group. Her research interests include sleep education, Indigenous sleep and health, sleep interventions for young children and the psychosocial and psychological impact of poor sleep. Sarah is an expert sleep consultant for the Australian Psychological Society and is often featured as an expert on ABC Radio. Sarah has presented over 90 conference presentations and published over 100 academic papers and books, including The Sensible Sleep Solution for Infants and The Boss of My Sleep book for toddlers. Her responsive sleep therapies are published and utilised worldwide. So let's get started. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really interested to hear, Sarah, what led you to your work on sleep?
It's a rather interesting journey. I had another career before being a psychologist. I was a ballet dancer, actually, and I had to get a real job when my dancing career ended. And so I went to university and took psychology as an undergraduate degree. And I was putting myself through university, and after the third year, I was vying for an honours degree. I got a summer scholarship, which is when you haven't got any money, a 6-week internship that's paid is really a good thing to do. So I took that summer scholarship, and the only program that was going that I could go on to was a program on sleep, learning about sleep disordered breathing in children and how it affects their psychology. So it was my first introduction to both the physiology of sleep and the psychology of sleep. And I ended up doing not just an honours and a master's, but a PhD on that subject. And when I came out of my PhD, I realised during my PhD that, yes, children who snore and have sleep disordered breathing, which is essentially sleep apnea, have difficulty behaving, attending, remembering, they have lower IQs and poorer behaviour. It wasn't just those children that had those problems. It was also children that didn't have sleep apnea, but also just had poor sleep. What does poor sleep look like? Irregular bedtimes, late bedtimes, not enough sleep. So really just behaviour around sleep could be as detrimental as a sleep disorder. And that's why I got interested in sleep psychology and then went into sleep psychology as a career.
Wow. So your focus was on children. Is it the same with adults?
That's a really good question. Little people are not just little humans. They do have differences in their sleep, as they do with everything else, because in terms of development, a young child won't be thinking or behaving or choosing to do things the same way as an adult will be. Young children have different ways of seeing their world, perceiving their world and behaving. So whilst I did my PhD and all my studies in children, sleep behaviour is universal across all human beings. It just differs with the age group. Now that depends on, for example, if you don't sleep well, as an adult, you might be able to work out why that might be. But as a child, you can't decide that quite so easily. One, because you're too little, and two, because you've got other people deciding for you. So sleep is the same. It changes with age, but then so does everything else.
Mm. In terms of adults, what are some of the barriers to getting adequate sleep?
Another great question. I think that is the crux of what sleep psychology actually is, because psychologists want to know about why we do things and understand people's behaviour and what thoughts and processes in our minds and emotions are going through our heads while we do stuff and why we do stuff. So the barriers to poor sleep in sleep psychology would be, okay, so maybe I'm too busy to sleep. Maybe I've got too much going on. Maybe I've got a busy job. Maybe I've got a high profile job. Maybe I've got a very big family. Maybe I'm a single parent. Maybe I've got other stresses. Maybe I haven't got a job, and so the stresses in the household are really high. Maybe I just don't know that sleep health is the foundation of all health. And if I can regulate sleep, then I can regulate my health in every other way. Meaning, it's important to get regular sleep. Now, what does that mean, regular sleep? Regular bedtimes, regular wake times. That doesn't mean to say we have to be on the clock every night and every morning. It means that we have to kind of keep our body rhythms in check. And all those things that I've mentioned, work, school, if you're a student or a child, family, stresses, employment or lack of, all these things can affect our routines and our rhythms. And our bodies love rhythm and they love routine, and they function best when that routine is regular. And the sleep-wake rhythm, which is based on the light-dark cycle, is the basic human rhythm. And so if that goes out and is not kept in check, and we can keep it in check, then the rest goes out too.
Right. When we think about light and dark, how does that affect our sleep?
Wow, that's a terrific question, and that I could talk about that for hours. Essentially, our bodies as human animals, we are biologically primed to be alert in the light of the day. And we have receptors in our eyes that pick up that light, and they are receptors specifically for light. And they send messages to all parts of the brain to say, it's light, it's alert time, it's wake up time, let's get going. On the contrary, at nighttime, when the light diminishes, the natural light I'm talking about, our eyes pick up that and they send messages to the brain to say, okay, it's dark time now, time to wind down, let's get to sleep eventually. And it also releases, those receptors in our eyes release hormones to release our melatonin. Melatonin is our sleep hormone, and it is the regulator of our sleep. It makes us sleepy. So triggered by light and dark. So essentially, thanks to light and dark, our bodies get the messages through our eyes that is our cycle. And based on that, and the fact that our body reacts to that in terms of temperature, in terms of mood, in terms of getting all our body systems to actually slow down, the only one that doesn't is the breathing cardiovascular one, obviously, because otherwise that wouldn't be good. But everything else slows down, and that is based on the light signals. Now, unfortunately, and I didn't mention this in the barriers that you asked about sleep, if we expose our eyes to excessive light, and that can be staying up late at night in a very light room, or do you know what, those LED lights that are so good for the environment are really bad for sleep, because they're very powerful. I know, it's terrible, because we're doing one thing on the one hand for the environment, which is terrific, but for sleep, it's not so great. So the light-dark cycle comes from a physiological, biological prime to be alert in the day and not alert at night.
Wow. There's so much to consider, isn't there? Can you help listeners understand how they might begin to improve their sleep?
Yeah, that's a good one. And coming out of COVID, hasn't that just been the biggest upheaval in most of our lives? It's just unbelievable.
Yes.
Who would have thought that would ever happen? So I think that you're right, Leanne. It's made us all think about how we can control our lives and what parts of our life we can't control. And sleep is certainly one that we can control, which is amazing, given that it has so much impact on every single possible part of our lives. Let me just go through that quickly about how the parts of our bodies that are affected by sleep: cardiovascular health, hypertension and blood pressure, cancer, immune system dysfunction, metabolic syndrome, such as diabetes and obesity. That's just the physical. Anxiety, depression, and more serious psychiatric and psychological disorders such as bipolar and schizophrenia all have relationships with sleep, whereby sleep can affect it and make an impact on it, but it can also improve it if it gets better. So when we have any of those underlying problems, or just we're just a little bit of a worry ball, even if we're not. Something like COVID or big upheavals like that can really throw us. And sleep will be both a cause and effect of that relationship. So when we are in that type of situation, sleep can be controlled. As I said, sleep is the foundation of all good health. So I think this was probably part of the narrative when COVID first hit, trying to keep a regular rhythm, because even when you're working at home, giving yourself a rhythm and a predictive routine during the day makes it feel like you're still doing things that you used to. And that feels predictable, and predictability is something that we humans love to do. And lack of control is something that we hate. So try to regulate your sleep and your wake times. One, that will be great for your routine, but two, it's really good for your circadian rhythm, which is that light dark cycle that I explained a little bit earlier. But you know what? Honoring sleep and honoring how important sleep is for our well-being and how it can impact all of those things means that if we do treat it carefully and with respect, it will respect us back. Sleep does have its own life. It does everything it should, when it needs to. We sleep what we need, when we need it, if we allow our bodies to do that, if we listen to it. So listening to our tired signs, allowing ourselves downtime, sleep will do its thing if we let it. We must listen to our bodies and listen to our tired signs. There was a whole badge of honor of working very hard, staying up late, getting in early to work, being the last one to leave, making sure that I look like I'm really working hard. And sleep is the last thing on my mind, but I really want to be one of those people that is necessary for a whole range of reasons. Not necessarily wrong, just it is misplaced in the fact that sleep can be given up and we can function as well. We simply can't. We simply will not be able to function the best we can if our sleep is not the best we can be. So in a situation where our lives might seem out of control, sleep is something that we can control.
Everything you've just said now really relates in my own life. This year, my father had a heart attack. He had a bypass. When I think about going through that stressful time, and you talked about those sleep signals, I remember, just kind of just operating on, just having to support family and everything like that. But I remember a real foggy feeling. I remember feeling like, am I actually losing my mind at the moment?
Wow.
Would that have been my lack of sleep playing a part in that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's probably both, and that's where sleep and psychology interface, because your extreme stress and your emotional responsibilities, all those emotions, yet you couldn't allow yourself to stop and do what you needed to do, take care of yourself, grieve, do all those things, because you had to perform, you had to do that. And so our body is hyper aroused and hyper alert because you have a responsibility. Your adrenaline is doing all the work there. Your cortisol, which is your stress hormone, is very high. High levels of stress hormones are really bad for us, because on a long-term basis, if we are constantly stressed, that can actually be detrimental to our body systems, physical and mental, and our body and our minds simply do not function. The part of our brain that needs to function under stress like that and keep us going is the amygdala, which is our fight or flight response. And that might sound a bit extreme in the situation you described, Leanne, but it's not, because the amygdala has different levels of stress response, but it's fighting hard to keep you going because you need to keep going. The part of your brain that keeps you thinking and clear-headed and making good decisions is not the amygdala, it's the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex doesn't get a look in when you're stressed. So literally your body, it releases different hormones. Believe this is amazing. When we are stressed, we release adrenaline and cortisol, which are not great for calm, clearly. And when we are not stressed, we release dopamine and serotonin, which are our happy hormones. So when our prefrontal cortex can kick in and start thinking about what we can do, and we can give ourselves time to maybe think straight, for want of a better word, dopamine and serotonin kick in, and our well-being is much greater. How do we do that when we're stressed? With great difficulty. We can do it. And that's where the psychology of calmness and mindfulness and all those different things can come in, as you'd know. So yes, it would absolutely be not simply because you weren't sleeping, but if you were stressed, you probably didn't sleep very well, and then that would be feeding on itself. Less sleep equals more stress, and more stress equals less sleep.
Mm. Oh, when you sort of put it into context like that, as you were talking through, I was seeing and understanding, why some of that might have been playing in my well-being at the time.
I think it's really great that you asked that question, because, many people that might not understand that connection might think, oh my gosh, something's wrong with me, what's going on here? And it may be as simple as a stress-sleep interaction. Honestly, if you can get your sleep in a situation like that, and that's a big if, because sometimes you can't do that when things are just so terrible. But if you can get more sleep, it literally does change your whole physiology. That's pretty amazing.
As a well-being professional, I knew and understood that, but even as that, it was a challenge to wake up to that, so to speak.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it? I too, at times of great personal stress, found my body doing unbelievable things. And I too, as a health professional, I honestly didn't know what was going on. Now, I think of many of us under enormous stress, and we are under stress, and particularly have been with COVID and so many other things. And sometimes we don't put two and two together. But I guess bottom line, my body's trying to tell me something. I need to listen.
Absolutely. I'm just loving this conversation. I could talk to you all day, but
it's
I'm also
pretty fascinating, I have to admit.
It is. I'd love to talk more on this another time. Is there a book or TED Talk or words of wisdom that you would recommend for the listeners today?
Yeah, okay. So there is a lot of information out there with the advent of the internet and the information highway. God, that's an old word. I haven't heard that for a while. But the availability of information at all hours of the day, it is important that we get the right information. And I could mention many, many things to see, but I guess knowing what to look for is really important. But the evidence-based websites, that would be the Sleep Health Foundation, the Australian version, the American version, the Australasian Sleep Association, both of which I'm a member, all have free resources and lots of information that is downloadable resources and printouts and information. The Raising Children's Network is a Victorian network that is really great for all things children. My own website, Sensible Sleep, is also based on evidence, given that I'm a researcher as well as a clinician. But there's a really great TED Talk that I often refer to. It's called Why Sleep Matters, and it's out of Harvard Medical School, of course, one of the biggest schools in the US, in fact, in the world, and has a brilliant sleep faculty. And they probably were the pioneers. Certainly Chuck Seisler, who's on that Why Sleep Matters, is a pioneer in sleep. And why it matters for our daily health, for our weekly health, for our longevity, for our children's health, for our family's well-being. And they give a really good chit chat about that. So that might be probably my top pick would be Why Sleep Matters.
Oh, thanks so much. And I'll be sure to share the links to those resources that you shared in the show notes. As we come to the end of this wonderful interview, I would love to know, what does your wellbeing strategy look like?
Oh, wow. That's interesting. That probably has changed a lot in my life. Yours probably has too. At my age, so I'm mid-50s, I'm looking at, I do now, of course, know about sleep. And I do know, and have for a long time, that if I don't sleep well, my body doesn't like it. I have a chronic disease, I have arthritis. And if I don't sleep well, my arthritis flares. Well, now I know the connection between sleep and immune dysfunction. That's understandable. But I think most of us will know that if we're sore or in pain or sick, sleeping is what can be a very big one. So keeping my sleep-wake schedule regular, making sure that I can get most of the time my 8 hours of sleep, because I know that that's how much I need, given that everybody needs a different amount of sleep. It's kind of important to know what you need individually. I keep it regular. So in terms of sleep, that's pretty clear. I do my wind-down routine, make sure I do my exercises every morning. Is that boring? Yeah, pretty much. But then I get started and I'm okay. And then I walk out in the park every morning and watch the sunrise sometimes. And I really love getting out into nature. I know that this sounds all stuff that you've heard about, but it really does make a difference to me. I'm doing a fasting regime at the moment where I don't eat for 14 hours every day. So I just eat at 8 o'clock and then I have breakfast until 10. And I've done a lot of reading literature on that. And I'm doing that just a couple of times a day. It stops me from eating too much carbohydrate, which is not good for me either. I drink less alcohol. I've reduced my caffeine intake. And you know what? In terms of my well-being psychologically, spontaneity. Whilst regularity is really important for me and my body in terms of sleep, particularly, and eating, spontaneity. I'm going to go for a walk at a different time of the day. I'm going to change my exercise run. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to walk right out of the sunset, watch the sunset at the beach just because I want to. That spontaneity makes me happy.
Oh, thanks so much for sharing with us, Sarah. I really do appreciate the time that you provided us to talk to us about sleep. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure. It's been great to chat, Leanne. Thank you much for the opportunity.
And thank you for listening. To find out more about Sarah's work, visit her website at sensiblesleep.com. If you found this podcast of benefit, please share it with someone you think will benefit too. I love to receive your feedback and I invite you to connect with me through LinkedIn, Facebook, or email me at info@resettothrive.com.au. And I'd be grateful if you could rate this podcast on iTunes to ensure it reaches even more. Thanks again for joining me. Until next time, wishing you well-being. Bye for now.